Last month, total credit card debt hit $1 trillion for the first time in history. Government spending, of course, is up. I mean, that's up, right? You don't have to turn on Eric Metaxas' show to know that. So these two are up: consumption and government investment and government spending. Investment is down. This is something like burning your furniture to stay warm this quarter. You will be warm, but there's a cold quarter coming. You know more economics than you think you do, and I tell my students at Dallas Baptist University the same thing. If we want to know the current state of the economy, we would look at three things. And sorry that a Baptist just crossed himself. I may have even done it backwards. I don't know. Why do I do that? It reminds me that there's three measures in economics that tell us where we are today. When I write a forecast for what's something called the Christian Economic Forum, I call it the Trinity. Three big measures that we look at. First is GDP. Just this week, they announced GDP growth was 4.9%, and I was astounded. Our goal is 3. Year after year after year, decade after decade, the goal is 3. We had 4.9, and it astounded me and almost every other economist in the world. But we need to know where that comes from, okay?
Let me guess. The pit of hell. Is it a lie?
Oh,
sounds like a lie. Tell me where do we get that number?
Okay. Yeah, and so there's never been a one-armed economist, because he'll always say, on the other hand, and there is another hand here. Yeah. Okay, so where does GDP come from? So should we smoke cigarettes or not?
We don't have to, but we can if they would make the conversation easier.
That's how I tell my students to remember it for the quiz. We should nix SIGs. GDP is Y equals CIG, SIGs, plus NX. We should nix SIGs. You're going to get it up right on the quiz this Thursday, Eric. Okay?
Nix SIGs. So we shouldn't smoke cigarettes. Okay.
Shouldn't smoke cigarettes. That's how you remember it for the quiz. But here's what happened this week. GDP is Y. It is made up of 4 elements: consumption, investment, government spending, net exports. Let's leave this one out for today. Consumer spending is up. Investment is down. Government spending, you're going to guess that's up, right, Eric?
I'm just guessing. Up? Yeah.
There you go. Good guess. And you get it right on the quiz on Thursday.
Okay.
Consumption is up, but people are spending money they don't have. When we went into the pandemic, savings rate was somewhere in the 7s, is now 3.5. Investment is down. Consumption is up, but people are spending money they don't have. Last month, total credit card debt hit $1 trillion for the first time in history. Government spending, of course, is up. I mean, that's up, right? You don't have to turn on Eric Metaxas' show to know that. So these two are up: consumption and government investment and government spending. Investment is down. This is something like burning your furniture to stay warm this quarter. You will be warm, but there's a cold quarter coming. Wow. So while 4.9 is really good growth, where did it come from? Consumption that people don't have, money that people don't have because they're spending on their credit cards, and government spending, which, of course, we know the government has no money. It has to come from someplace else.
Okay, so the 4.9 figure is bad news. That is bad news.
Yeah. Well, I said there's never been a one-armed economist. We expect 3, we get 4.9. What do we do? Complain. But really, it is short term. We have been eating some sugar, and things feel good this quarter. Next quarter, the sugar is going to go away, and we're going to be 15 pounds overweight. That's the prediction.
Where do you see the economy next year?
Yeah, next year, that's my point, is I think it's going to be worse because you can't continue to spend money you don't have. You can't continue to do government spending with other people's money. That has to wear out eventually. So it has to slow down. Investment is really what makes the economy grow. And we had negative investment in the last quarter. So that's GDP. If I can get my 3 points in here. The second one is inflation. We hope inflation is 2%. It's now 3.7. Now that's much better than the near 9 or 10 that we had recently. But the Biden administration is bragging that they've brought it down to 3.7. Okay. If I had a student at Dallas Baptist University who's hoping to make a 90, like you did in school, they're hoping to make a 90, and they made a 55, they'd be disappointed, wouldn't they? Well, that's what's going on with inflation. It's 3.7. They're bragging about that, but we hope it's 2. Everybody knows the goal is 2. So they're missing it by about 40 to 50%. And if my students missed it by 40 to 50%, they'd be really sad about it, and their parents would too. So 3.7, while it's better than the 9 or 10 that we were bumping up against a couple quarters ago, it's still terrible, and it harms the poor more than the rich. That's why Christian economists care about this. The rich can delay their purchases of yachts and their trips to Europe. They can go next year. Poor people cannot delay purchase of diapers and milk. They have to buy them on the daily market. So inflation is 3.7. It's better than 9 or 10. It's still a long ways from the goal of 2.
Is that even realistic? In other words, in this day and age, when I hear, oh, the unemployment numbers or whatever, I really believe that they're fudging it. In other words, that I can't get real answers, real clarity, because I think anecdotally, most people would say, the economy is terrible, but they're telling me, you have the White House spokespeople saying things, and look, they've been printing money. They've been doing every horrible thing. They're cooking the books, right? At the end of the day, we're going to have to deal with it. But they're trying to make it sound better than it is. So I guess, is this a real number? I mean, it's not a great number, but do we even know that this is a real number when we're talking about inflation?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There's a couple of responses to that. First, you're talking about politicians making economic decisions. I've said so many times in the classroom, they're good politicians, they're terrible economists. I was at a speech the other day by former Senator Phil Gramm, and he wrote a book called The Myth of American Inequality, specifically to answer what you're exactly saying. He said the government figures aren't accurate. Okay. And the third one about that inflation thing, tell people who are buying diapers and milk that it's only 3.7. No, it's not. In those core items of food, it is much, much higher. And you don't have to tell poor people this. They know it when they go to the grocery store. So you're asking a great question.
Well, I mean, I have to say, again, I notice it. I live in New York City, so this is, not normal. But, I am astonished. The taxi rides were always a little bit expensive, but it is literally like double in a few years. I've never seen anything like it. It's just, and you're thinking, what is going on around here? Now, again, that's part of socialist, New York mayor, basically adding taxes and surcharges and stuff. It's corruption. It's awful. But I think it goes way beyond what I'm seeing in my little universe, that your average American says things are horrible. So when they give out these numbers, I just don't know who's getting comforted from that.
Yeah, and I think the 3.7 compared to the goal of 2, the best comparison is my student who hopes to make a 90% and is making a 55. That's failing. 3.7 is a terrible inflation number. And unemployment was the third figure that I wanted to give to you.
Yeah.
It's 3.8, and that's a very good number also. Our goal is 5, so it's actually better than we expect.
But do I believe that? I no longer believe these numbers. The unemployment numbers, I ceased to believe them when Biden got in. I have to say that they changed the way they compute unemployment.
Yeah, no, you're making exactly a very good point. And the second number you look at is the labor participation rate, which is low. So 3.8 means those who are seeking jobs are getting them.
Right.
But there's a lot of people not seeking jobs.
What does that say about the overall state of the nation and the economy? Not good. Very bad.
I'm called the Christian economist, and there you get into the Christian part. What is our view of work? I was in line at Walmart the other day, and the woman in front of me seemed to know the checkout guy. And she said to him, I don't work because I don't have to. Okay, Eric, that's what's going on in our nation. That's what you're referring to. People don't want to work. I say, if you love your neighbor, you'll provide her with products and services she demands. If you love yourself, you'll make a profit while doing so. But it's becoming common practice to not work because you don't have to.
Are they getting government handouts? I mean, I feel like I'm living in a socialist world where Joe Biden has taken money that isn't his and given it to people to get votes so that they don't have to work. That's a lot of what happened in the COVID economy. It's utterly despicable. It's just like holding a bullet, to the future in the heads of the kids that are going to have to deal with this nightmare.
Right, because for an administration who talks so much about sustainability, they don't know much about economic sustainability. You cannot continually take from the rich and give to the poor. I mean, it just doesn't work. As Margaret Thatcher famously said, at some point you run out of other people's money. So my view is that the reason a lot of these people, when I talked about consumption, they're consuming things they don't have. My view, and this is just from my Christian worldview, is that it's some kind of a moral hazard, meaning they were given money for doing nothing over the years of the pandemic, and they think that's going to continue. It will not continue. As I said last month, total credit card debt went over $1 trillion for the first time. You can't sustainably do this. People are spending money they don't have. We have known the government is spending money they don't have. I mean, that's obviously true, and that demands another visit with you, but we all know that the government has no money. So any money it spends has to be redistributed from other people. It's not sustainable. You're right. So we have moved from God to government in our generation, just you and I. And so we remember hospitals with names like St. Catherine's and St. Bishop's and St. Luke's. I'm in the Dallas area. We have three major systems. Baylor is Baptist. Methodist is, guess what? Methodist. And the other is Presbyterian. You notice where those came from? In just our generation, healthcare has moved from God to government. Many other things have. I know you just finished writing a book and you're not interested in writing another one, but this would make a good book. How we've moved from God to government. And just that little example of healthcare is a good start. The four biggest expenditures of the federal government are healthcare, Social Security, defense, and interest on the debt. I would argue that three of those are not biblical. The Bible tells us to take care of our widows and orphans and immigrants. And we did in our generation, Eric, you and I did. And in the last 50 or 60 years, we've stopped doing it and allowed the government to do it. Second is Social Security. There's no biblical basis for Social Security. There is probably a biblical basis for defense because we have a fallen world. There's no biblical basis for paying $400 billion in interest. Look, three of the four major expenditures of the federal government are probably not biblical. And that's my point about we have moved from God to government. In economics terms, we always use supply and demand.
This is obvious. I mean, I think people know this generally, and I do talk about this and write about this maybe more obliquely. But when you cease worshiping God as God, you make the government God, and that's basically what authoritarian governments around the world and now in America are trying to do. They're trying to say, like, you're worshiping God. That's a threat to our power is government power. Now, anybody who has a healthy, deeply American view of these things says that's what we want. We the people to be free and to look to God to guide them, not to government. We want as little government as possible. We need minimal government. We need government for some things, but we don't need to make government everything. We don't need government to have the kind of power that we have given it and that in some cases it's taken. And I think we need to be clear that it is in direct competition with God, folks. That's really ultimately at the heart of this. And it's why, I'm a fiscal conservative, because I really do believe that when the government gets involved in the economy, it harms everyone. It doesn't just harm the numbers. It actually takes away increasing amounts of freedom. And that's basically what we're seeing.
Yeah, and that's what Keynesian economics is. You've just given a good explanation of it. Keynesian economics is about demand. It's about increasing aggregate demand. We have proven that it doesn't work. As a matter of fact, Keynes admitted it didn't work. When someone pointed out to him it didn't work, he said, well, in the long run, we're all dead. Do you realize how selfish that is?
Well, it's cynical to the bottom. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's what Keynesianism is. And so I'll quote one of my favorite Christian economists. There aren't many of us, by the way, but there's a guy named Art Lindsley who says something about what you just said, Eric. He said, government should punish evil but not do good. The church should do good but not punish evil. Generally, I think he's correct. And in our lifetime, we've moved from government doing so much, trying to do good, but they're not structured to do good. And this goes back to the work of Abraham Kuyper that you and I talked about last time we were together, and the spheres that he talked about. But there's different spheres in society, and God had different ideas for them. So he had something in mind for the family, something for the church, something for government, something for business. We've moved it all to government in our lifetimes, and that's a mistake. How do we get out? Now, that's a bigger question.
Well, I mean, it's a mistake, and it's fundamentally at odds with the American founders' vision. In other words, the idea of governing ourselves is antithetical to what we're talking about. The bigger the government gets, the bigger the government bureaucracy gets, the less free we are. And if anybody ever wanted to do America a favor, they would drain that swamp. They would absolutely get rid of the Department of Education, get rid of levels of bureaucracy, because the bigger our government has gotten, the less free we have become. And of course, the economy tells the story. And it's not like they're doing a good job and we don't like it. They're doing a very, very, very bad job, because we've been talking about the economy. 30 seconds left. Dave Arnott, what else can we say?
Yeah, I think we make a good point. Why did the founders have a 3 parts of government? Because they believed in the fallen nature. They wanted checks and balances. And why is it one party now wants a uniparty government? Because they don't believe in the fallen nature, Eric. That's it. And so if we believe there's a God who created the world, but fallen humans have messed it up, our job is to help to figure out how, through our economic behavior, do we redeem this? Do we bring it back to what God's creational intent was? That's what we try to do as Christian economists.
Beautifully put. Dr. Dave Arnott can be found at The Christian Economist. The Christian Economist. Dr. Dave Arnott, thank you so much.
Pleasure to be with you, Eric.